Right now, somewhere in your life, you are adjusting yourself. You are turning your voice down in a meeting so you don't sound too eager. You are turning your personality up around a certain friend so you don't feel invisible. Too much here, not enough there. And you have never once questioned why your worth seems to shift depending on the room. Most people assume this is just personality. It isn't. It's a pattern your brain learned to survive, and it's running quietly in the background of almost every interaction you have. Start with the feeling itself. You know it instantly. In one situation, you feel like you're overwhelming someone, talking too fast, wanting too much from them, taking up space you shouldn't. In another, you feel like you're fading, like nothing you offer is enough to be noticed or valued. These feel like opposite problems. They are not. They come from the exact same source. Psychologists call this contingent self-worth. Your sense of value isn't fixed. It's conditional. It rises and falls based on how you think others are receiving you in the moment. Developmental psychologist Susan Harter spent decades studying how children form their sense of self, and she found something striking. Kids don't naturally believe their worth depends on performance. That belief gets installed. It's taught, response by response, reaction by reaction, long before you're old enough to question it. Think about how that installation happens. A child does something loud, messy, emotional, too big for the room, and a parent, exhausted or overwhelmed, responds with a sigh, a sharp tone, a look of irritation, nothing dramatic, just enough. The child learns a lesson faster than any lecture could teach it. Being fully yourself is inconvenient. Shrink. Then, in a different moment, that same child is quiet, careful, undemanding. The parent, relieved, offers warmth, approval, attention. The child learns a second lesson to match the first. Being small earns love. Being big loses it. Here's the part that explains your adult life. Children don't stop there. They don't just learn to shrink. They learn to constantly monitor. Am I too much right now? Not enough? Which version of me is safe here? This scanning becomes so automatic that by adulthood, you don't even notice you're doing it. You just feel the discomfort, sense that you're never quite calibrated correctly. This is where humanistic psychologist Carl Rogers becomes essential. Rogers introduced a concept called conditions of worth. He argued that many people grow up receiving love and approval only when they meet certain conditions: be quieter, be more impressive, be less needy, be more agreeable. Over time, a person stops asking, what do I actually feel, and starts asking, what do I need to be right now to be accepted? Your authentic self and your presented self split apart, and the gap between them is exactly where the too much, not enough feeling lives. Notice how this plays out in the rooms you occupy every day. At work, you might feel like too much when you ask a clarifying question in a meeting, worried you're slowing everyone down. Then, in the same week, you feel like not enough when a colleague casually mentions an achievement and your stomach drops. Same brain, same wound, two different disguises. With friends, it shows up as a strange oscillation. Hold back a strong opinion because you don't want to dominate the conversation. Too much. Then you stay quiet in a group chat for 2 days and start spiraling, convinced everyone's fine without you. Not enough. You are not inconsistent. You are responding to a threat detection system that was built when you were far too young to know it was being built at all. Here's the counterintuitive twist. The too much feeling and the not enough feeling aren't actually about how much space you're taking up. They're both about the same underlying fear, the fear of being fundamentally unacceptable as you are. Too much is the fear that your real self, unfiltered, will overwhelm people and drive them away. Not enough is the fear that your real self, unfiltered, isn't sufficient to keep people interested. Both fears assume the same thing, that your unfiltered self is the problem. This is where self-compassion researcher Kristin Neff's work becomes relevant. Neff has spent years studying what happens when people replace harsh self-judgment with self-kindness, especially in moments of perceived failure or inadequacy. Her research consistently shows that people who practice self-compassion don't become complacent or lazy, the fear many people have. Instead, they become more stable. Their sense of worth stops swinging wildly based on outside reactions. Why? Because self-compassion interrupts the core mechanism driving the too much, not enough cycle. It stops outsourcing your value to other people's facial expressions. Think about how much of your day is spent reading faces. A slight pause before someone responds to your text, a change in tone on a call, a friend who seems distracted while you're talking. Your nervous system treats these tiny signals like verdicts. Too much, not enough. But you are reading incomplete data and turning it into a permanent judgment about your worth. That's not perception. That's a trained reflex. Here's something that might reframe this permanently. The people who made you feel too much as a child were very likely overwhelmed themselves, managing their own stress, their own unmet needs, their own nervous systems that had never learned regulation. Your bigness wasn't actually too much. Their capacity was too small in that moment. Two very different things got fused into one belief, and only one of them was ever true. The same goes for not enough. The silence you received was scarcity, not judgment. But a child cannot understand context. A child can only understand outcome. I did something. I got less warmth. therefore I am the problem. That equation, formed at 5 or 7 or 10 years old, is still quietly running your adult relationships, your work anxiety, your friendships, your sense of whether you deserve to simply exist without performing. There's a reason this feeling cuts so deep, and it isn't just about approval. It's about survival. Social psychologist Baumeister spent years researching what happens to people when they feel excluded or rejected by a group. His findings were consistent. The human brain does not process social rejection as a minor inconvenience. It processes it as a threat to survival itself. For most of human history, being cast out of your group didn't just hurt your feelings. It could get you killed. You couldn't hunt alone, defend yourself alone, or raise children alone. So your nervous system evolved a very specific alarm. Anything that might lead to exclusion gets flagged immediately, urgently, before you even have time to think about it consciously. This is why the too much feeling doesn't feel like a mild social miscalculation. It feels like danger. Your heart rate actually changes. Your stomach actually drops. That is not an overreaction. That is an ancient survival system doing exactly what it was built to do, just badly miscalibrated for a modern world where nobody is actually going to exile you from the tribe for asking a question in a meeting. Watch how this shows up in a single ordinary day. You send a text with a joke in it, immediately reread it, wondering if it came across as trying too hard. That's the exclusion alarm. You don't get invited to a lunch a few coworkers organized last minute, and your mind quietly files it as evidence that you're forgettable. That's the same alarm, just wearing a different costume. Neither reaction is really about the text or the lunch. Both are your nervous system scanning for signs that you're about to be cast out using data that was never designed to prove anything at all. Now bring this back to today. The next time you feel that familiar tightening, the sense that you just said too much, wanted too much, felt too much, pause. Ask yourself a different question. Is this actually true right now? Or is this an old alarm going off in a body that learned to expect punishment for being fully present? And the next time you feel small, forgettable, not enough to matter, ask the same question in reverse. Is this evidence? Or is this an old story mistaking silence for rejection? Consider how differently this could go if the alarm weren't running the show. Imagine sending that text without rereading it 5 times. Imagine sitting in a meeting, asking the question, and letting the answer matter more than how you looked asking it. Imagine hearing about a lunch you weren't part of and simply thinking, that sounds fun, instead of building an entire narrative about your place in the group. None of that requires you to become a different person. It only requires the alarm to stop mistaking ordinary life for evidence of unworthiness. This is not about becoming more confident in the way that word usually gets used. Confidence, as most people describe it, is really just the absence of that specific alarm. It isn't a personality trait you either have or don't. It's a nervous system that has learned slowly that being fully present will not get it exiled. You were never actually too much. You were never actually not enough. You were a child who learned correctly how to survive the specific people in your specific environment. That system worked. It kept you loved, or at least kept you safe enough. But you are not in that environment anymore, and the calculations you're still running were built for a world that no longer exists. Right now, somewhere in your life, you are adjusting yourself. But maybe, just maybe, the adjustment was never the problem to solve. Maybe the real work was noticing you were never asked to shrink or perform in the first place. You were only ever asked to be believed.